Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Flash-Enabled Availability, Evolving Beyond the Backup. Today's event is brought to you by Pure Storage and Veeam. Thank you, sponsors, for joining us, and thank you, everyone out there in the audience, for joining us on today's webinar. Today's event is brought to you or produced by Actual Tech Media, and my name is David Davis. I'm excited to be your moderator on today's event. Now, before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping here that we need to cover. First off, we want this to be an educational event for you. We want you to learn a lot and get all your questions answered. To do that, we encourage you to use the questions box there in the GoToWebinar control panel. We have our expert presenters, who I'll introduce here in just a moment, standing by, and we'll be doing a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the event where we will be answering your hardest, toughest, best questions. So keep those questions coming throughout the event. Also, we have a couple of handouts I want to call your attention to there. Also in the GoToWebinar control panel, they are titled, Modernizing with Pure Storage and Veeam. It's a joint solution brief. It has some great architectural diagrams there about how the solution that we're discussing today really works. And there's also a modernized data protection with Flash and Cloud handout that you can download from the console as well. So make sure that you click on those and download those now before the event is over. And then finally, we have a $300 Amazon gift card to give away to one lucky attendee on the live event. If you're watching this event on demand, I'm sorry, the drawing has already occurred. Prize terms and conditions can be found on our website at events.actualtechmedia.com. All prize winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 for tax purposes. Sorry, but we have to do that. And without further ado, I'm excited to get started on today's webinar. Today's presenters, Mr. David Hutchinson, Rapid Restore Solutions Manager at Pure Storage, and Mr. Sean Liu, Solutions Architect with the Global Alliances team at Veeam. David, Sean, thank you so much for being on the event today.
Pleasure for having us.
And with that, I'm going to hand it over to David so that we can get started. All right, David.
I think you should be able to see that. Looks good from my end.
I do see your screen.
Perfect.
Yep, take it away.
Thank you, David. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for the next 60 minutes or so. I'll be co-presenting with Sean. I'll let Sean introduce himself in a moment. But we're going to be really talking to you today, and hopefully you'll be learning as much as you can about how Pure Storage and Veeam together are really modernizing the data protection world, with a mix of, Veeam's advanced capabilities and Pure Storage's advanced storage capabilities. And I guess the sort of theme really is what we call our flash to cloud strategy. So I think a lot of you will already be familiar with, disk to tape architectures, and that's largely remained unchanged since sort of, the early, around 2005, 2006. So it's pretty much what a lot of customers, and there's still a lot of tape out there as well, but pretty much more at the back end for long-term retention. So our view and our sort of roadmap and some acquisitions we've made and our partnership with Veeam is really, explaining to customers the advantages of transforming that disk to tape architecture to a flash to cloud architecture. And you can see from this slide that, the journey down this journey to flash to cloud really starts with using flash storage as your primary storage, and I think that's certainly a market that Pure have disrupted, and it's becoming fairly commonplace now to find to be using tier 1 apps with primary flash storage. So I guess really the sort of incremental, or the transition, if you like, is actually bringing flash to secondary storage, so where you'd actually target your backup storage to be. So we'll certainly talk a lot about that, and how that integrates with Veeam, and what sort of successes we've had there. And then the more recent layer is using that, you're bringing that sort of to cloud tier to the sort of third part of the movement. So rather than going to tape, and I think a lot of you are using tape, will know some of the challenges, and it's been a great technology for a long time, but customers are telling us that their needs are changing, and sort of tape-based long-term retention storage can't really meet the demands that their business have. So we'll talk about technologies integrated with Veeam on how we can actually either leverage public cloud as a backup target, or in fact private cloud. So I think the world is, I think the pendulum is sort of swinging the other way these days. I think sort of 4 or 5 years ago there was a sort of gold rush towards public cloud, but I just spend a lot of time on the road talking to customers all over the world, and it's kind of interesting to see. I think customers are realizing especially if you've got very long-term data retention requirements, if you're in a regulated industry where you have to keep data for many, many years for compliance, public cloud doesn't always stack up to be the best solution. So when we talk about cloud today, we'll be talking both in a sort of public cloud and then also in what you might call private cloud. But we'll get to that a little bit later on. So these are the 3 steps, if you like, the arc that me and Sean will take you through. So Sean, I'm going to hand over to you for the for the first part of the arc.
All right, thank you, David. Hi everyone, my name is Sean Liu. I'm a solutions architect at Veeam Software, and I work very closely together with the PURE team on some of these solutions, including what I'm about to talk about now, which is integration into their production array offering in FlashArray. Right, so FlashArray enables customers to have tons of IOPS to run their production workloads. Right, so what we've done here is we've actually integrated into FlashArray to leverage the snapshot capabilities of the FlashArray itself. Right, because let's be honest, right, the snapshot capability of FlashArray is going to be much more efficient than snapshot capabilities of VMware vSphere. Right, so we're going to not only leverage the snapshot capabilities of FlashArray, but also we'll leverage some of the capabilities that vSphere has built in as well, like change block tracking and some of those capabilities to help speed up the backups overall. Right, in the end, it's really about taking a more efficient backup and lowering the impact on your production environment. So once we back up from those snapshots, we can send the backups to a backup storage array like the FlashBlade. Right, and in the next section here, David will talk about how we actually land the backups on the FlashBlade. Right, so next slide, please, David. So let's talk about the challenge we're trying to overcome with this. Right, and those of you that have used VMware vSphere for quite some time are very aware of this particular challenge. Right, and it really revolves around VMware vSphere snapshots. Right, prior to our evolution into storage integrated backups, we relied on VMware vSphere backups. Right? The challenge with that is that when we go to back up a virtual machine, that snapshot's going to be open for the entire time it takes us to back up that particular virtual machine. Right? And if this is a large virtual machine like a 3 terabyte SQL server, it could take some time. Right? So that snapshot could grow to a pretty significant size. And the impact really comes when you go to consolidate or remove that snapshot. Right? It's not how long the snapshot's been open, it's how long it's going to take us to remove that particular snapshot. And the removal of that snapshot not only takes a considerable amount of time, but it could also cause potential stuns. Right? It could impact the production environment, drop pings, unresponsiveness, things of that nature. Right, so it is not ideal, especially for highly transactional applications like SQL or Exchange. So we evolved our backup solution to have storage integration. Right, so on the right here is what it looks like with storage integration into Pure FlashArray. What we're doing here is we do still leverage VMware vSphere Snapshot, but only momentarily. Right, and the reason why we do this is by leveraging vSphere Snapshots along with the array-based snapshots, we're able to capture things like change block tracking. Right? Change block tracking is very important. It also allows us to achieve file level consistency, application level consistency before we actually take the storage array-based snapshot. Okay, so now that, as you can see, the vSphere snapshot is only open for a very small period of time, right, before we actually remove it. And then we go on backing up directly from the array-based snapshot itself. And of course, the advantage of the array-based snapshot is when we go to remove the array-based snapshot, there is little to no impact on your environment. Next slide, please, David. When we talk about integration into FlashArray, there's actually multiple points of integration. Right? It's not just about being able to leverage the snapshot technology that's already built into FlashArray to back up from. It's also about making management easier, right? Operational efficiency, right? Capabilities like being able to schedule snapshots directly within Veeam, right? You don't have to take a backup. We can just create snapshots for you, right? So some of you may be asking, why would we want to do that? Right, so there's a number of different reasons why you would want to do that. One, right, Veeam can add application level consistency prior to taking the hardware snapshot, right? So if you want to take an application consistent snapshot, you would need something like Veeam to achieve that application level consistency. We can also handle things like log truncation and other capabilities with that. So let's talk about how one would take advantage of snapshot scheduling along with backups in order to achieve a lower recovery point objective and help increase our efficiency when it comes to recovery, right? So this is an example of how we can leverage snapshots along with a backup plus a snapshot to essentially shrink our recovery point objective from what is effectively, in this particular example, 24 hours down to a single hour, right? In the past, when we talk to people about backups, most customers back up once, maybe twice a day, right? So in that particular example, your recovery point objective is between 12 and 24 hours, right? Depending on how often you back up. That means if you were to have an issue and you needed to recover from your backup, you could potentially lose up to 24 hours worth of data. Right? That's in this day and age, that's almost completely unacceptable, right, from an SLA perspective. So in order to accomplish tighter SLAs, lowering that recovery point objective, we can not only back up once a day, but we can also layer upon that snapshots, right? By creating snapshot only jobs, we can create snapshots more often with no impact to our environment, right? So now you can do, in this particular example, we're creating a snapshot every hour. So what we've effectively done is we've shrunk our recovery point objective from 24 hours down to 1 hour, right? But having these snapshots don't mean a thing if you can't perform the recovery that you're looking for directly from a snapshot. And that brings me to my next slide here. Our next point of integration is actually the Veeam Explorer for storage snapshots. This is going to help you by giving you the capability to perform faster restores directly from a snapshot, no matter whether it is an application consistent or a crash consistent snapshot. We can restore from either, and you get the same restore capabilities. Next slide, please, David. So the Veeam Explorer for storage snapshots, like I mentioned before, allows you to recover from any snapshot that is on the FlashArray itself, right? Actually, Veeam doesn't even have to create it. It could be a protection group snapshot that was created prior to Veeam being installed even. And we still give you the same great recovery options because we go and interrogate the array and find out what VMs are available within each of the snapshots that are pre-existing. Right, so if you notice on the right there, there's a number of different recovery options directly from a snapshot, anything from a single VM down to individual application items. And this is where the power of the Veeam Explorer for storage snapshot comes in, because you can perform these recoveries very quickly, and everything is assisted by a wizard designed specifically for those applications like Exchange, SharePoint, Active Directory, SQL, and Oracle. Next slide, please, David. So here is a screen capture of the Veeam Explorer for storage snapshot. As you can see here, when you go and take a look at an array you've added into the Veeam console, we'll automatically go and interrogate that array. We'll locate all of the different volumes underneath that particular array, and then all of the snapshots underneath each volume. Right? So if you select a particular volume snapshot, Veeam will already know all of the virtual machines that exist within that particular snapshot. And it's a matter of just selecting the snapshot that you're looking for. Each of them will have like an associated date and timestamp, so you can identify the specific recovery point you're looking for. And then you just right-click and select the recovery option that you're looking for. So here in this example, we're highlighting a number of different application-specific recoveries. And next slide, please, David. And what these application-specific recoveries are going to do is they're going to open wizards designed specifically for those applications. So now you can launch this recovery option without having to worry about trying to mount the snapshot or do anything. Veeam does everything automatically for you on the back end, right? And the one thing I like to point out is that when we do anything with a snapshot, we always protect the snapshot from any potential deletion or any accidental mishaps, right? So what we're going to do first is we're actually going to clone the snapshot, right? That way, when you're performing a restore or when you're manipulating the snapshot in any way, you're doing it from a clone. So when we're done, we can simply just delete the clone and the original snapshot remains 100% intact and valid. Right? So just by right-clicking and selecting the application that you're looking to perform a restore from, Veeam will launch an application-specific wizard, right, one of 5. And then this allows you to go in there and select what level of restore you're looking for, right? For SQL, you can restore things like a single database, right, a single table. For Exchange, I can go in and pull out a single email, right? SharePoint, you can restore a single document, etc. Right? So very flexible. And the lovely thing about it is I can launch one of these wizards from scratch, from a snapshot, and have it up and running in a matter of a couple of minutes. So I can perform a single email restore and be done within a matter of minutes. Next slide, please, David. So another really powerful feature that is actually underutilized is a Veeam Data Labs, right? This is a very powerful feature built into our solution, and it allows you to leverage those snapshots that you've created, right? You can also do this from a backup as well. But what it allows you to do is it actually allows you to create a completely isolated lab that can be used for things like testing and development, right? And a number of other use cases, which we'll discuss here in a minute. But I can actually power on virtual machines from a snapshot or from a backup inside this data lab. And I can have Veeam perform automated recovery verification, right? What this means is I can have Veeam go and automatically check to make sure those VMs are 100% recoverable, right? I'm not talking just a simple CRC or an integrity check, right? I'm talking about actually powering on the virtual machine to make sure that it'll boot up, the applications come online, etc. Right? And it can also send you an automated report letting you know that, yes, this VM is 100% recoverable, right? So it's fantastic for auditors. But what I can use this data lab for is a number of other things, and it's essentially limitless, right? It just depends on what you're looking to do with it. You can do anything with it because I can make sure that necessary dependencies are met. And the beautiful thing is it doesn't require any additional hardware, right? That environment is completely isolated from the outside world. So I can stand up this environment alongside my production environment without having to worry about any IP conflicts or any potential issues with production. Next slide, please, David. So what are some of the things you can do with Veeam Data Lab, right? Very powerful. Actually, just recently, when we launched update 4 of our 9.5 product, we introduced a couple of additional use cases in secure restore and staged restore, right? Staged restore essentially allows customers that need to be GDPR compliant the right to be forgotten, right? They can power on applications inside the data labs, perform a stage restore, and execute scripts against those applications to make sure that the customer's information is stripped out before it's actually restored back into production, right? And then you have secure restore, which allows you to actually, before you restore an application back into production, let's say an application was affected by malware or ransomware in production, right? And you need to go and perform a restore of it, and you want to make sure that you have a valid restore point before you roll it back into production, because some of those things, like ransomware particularly, right? Some of those things are time bombed, right? Which means you won't notice or detect them until after a certain period of time has already elapsed, right? So when you go to perform a restore, it may already be infected. So what we can do with secure restore is you can actually power on that virtual machine inside of the data labs as well, and uses the data lab infrastructure, and we can actually perform a scan against that application before you restore it. And it's an automated process, right? You can choose what you want Veeam to do if we do detect some sort of infection. Okay, and a number of other great use cases for data labs, right? We actually have customers that go and leverage data labs on a daily basis, right? You can schedule these to power on. We have customers that are power on multiple data labs simultaneously. It helps to speed the product development, right? They can have their SQL DBAs and give them their own data lab. They can go in there and do any type of troubleshooting, testing, patching, code changes that they want on their own without affecting production, right? Because that's the biggest challenge that some of our customers have with test dev environments, is trying to keep those test dev environments in sync with their production environments, right? Test dev always lags behind production some period of time, right? 2 weeks, a month, sometimes even more, right? So what you're developing in test dev may not accurately reflect the environment that you're pushing it out to in production. That's when you start to run into issues, right? But with data labs, we can give the customer a production-like environment. It could be from a snapshot I just took 5 minutes ago, right? So now you have a very production-like environment to develop against, right? And next slide, please, David. I will talk about one of our success stories that we have together, right? This is a global leader in project development and construction, right? And it actually took out a competing array within NetApp, and they really love the ease of management, right? And being able to leverage that Veeam console to perform all the scheduling that you need, you know, create snapshots with retention, and just helps to alleviate having to go to multiple different consoles to accomplish what you're looking to accomplish from a data protection solution perspective, right? They also really love the way that Pure's evergreen model works. And maybe, David, you can chime in a little bit about the evergreen model. I think you might be on.
Sorry, I was on mute there. So for those of you who don't know, you know, I think one of the primary reasons that Pure has been successful is certainly with FlashArray is this whole concept of the evergreen model. So if you think about when you buy traditional, certainly think about 2 or 3 years ago, because a lot of the competition have kind of seen the success of evergreen and have tried to duplicate it, and it's, you know, buying models make that quite hard. But if you think about the traditional life cycle of buying storage, you know, at year one you buy storage and you deploy. You know, for 3 or 4 years you're in a commercial agreement for 3 or 4 years, 5 years maybe, and over that period of time, you know, there's obviously, we all know how quickly the IT universe moves and changes and improves. Technology's getting smaller and quicker, you know, as time goes on. And what typically happens is you get to the end of that 4-5 year cycle, and then, you know, your storage partner will, you know, come and talk to you about the latest and greatest, and you've potentially got a contractual change, probably an uplift in commercials, and a complex kind of forklift upgrade. And I think I've only been at Pure sort of 8 months or so now, and I certainly saw, before I joined Pure, the evergreen model. As long as you're in a support contract, Pure will upgrade, you know, as technology changes on the FlashArray side. So as controllers get quicker, smaller, you know, etc. As long as you're in the, you know, in a support agreement, we will come in and we will replace the technology inside of FlashArray, whatever components are changing, and we will replace that as part of the contract. And we've probably done 5 or 6, maybe less technology shifts, at least 3, if not more, on the FlashArray side. And every time we've had a substantial technology shift, even when we've changed literally the size of the physical size of some of the blades, you know, we've been able to migrate customers non-disruptively. So I think, you know, from a business model and keeping up with sort of technology developments, the evergreen story, I think, has been an immensely successful, you know, immensely successful part of Pure's overall story.
Yep. Thank you for that, David. That really kind of goes along well with what we're trying to accomplish from a data protection perspective, right? It's really about not impacting production, not disrupting production, and being able to accelerate innovation, right? So that's really aligns with what Pure has from a non-disruptive upgrade perspective, and just not having to perform those forklift type data migrations that customers are having to do in the past. Right. And with that, I'll pass it over to David to continue with our flash to cloud story.
Thank you, Sean. Okay, so Sean's done a great job of talking about sort of the you know, the sort of inception of Pure in the flash world, flash array for all primary storage, and the great integration and the success we've had with integrating Veeam into that. So I think you've got a good sense of kind of that first stage of all flash. So I'm going to just take you through the next couple of stages. So I'm going to talk about building what we call the data hub, and this is all centered around our Pure's second product offering, which has been in the marketplace for about 24 months now, and we call that Flash Blade. So let me just kind of give you, before we do that, we have a poll here. So David, do you want to can you handle the logistics of the poll? So what we're trying to understand here is we just want to gauge very quickly, you know, just when you think about restore, when you're restoring data. So, you know, I know we all do a lot of backup, but you know, what I really want to focus the sort of next 10 minutes on is actually thinking about, you know, that awful moment when something bad has happened and I quickly got to restore some data.
I'm bringing up the poll right now.
Thank you.
So it says, are you achieving your restore targets? And the questions or the options here are: yes, I can recover my critical applications within the SLA. No, I get nervous when I have to restore my critical apps. Or finally, I don't worry, I rarely restore. So I'll give everyone here a few seconds to answer that poll, and then I'll share the results so you can see how you stack up with everyone else who's on the event today. All right, looks like most of the audience has responded. Thank you, everyone. Let's get just a few more votes in, and I'll close the poll now. And let's take a look at the results. So 41% said, I can recover my critical apps within the SLA. 33% said, no, I get nervous when I have to restore my critical apps. Being very honest, I appreciate that. And 27% said, I don't worry about it, I rarely restore. David, Sean, what do you think?
I mean, that's not a you know, that's not an uncommon spread. I mean, there's still it still kind of surprises me that there's people who, you know, customers who don't actually do any restore. But I think that's you know, I think if you take those away, maybe those people have just got lucky and never had to restore anything. But for the other two, yeah, I think that pretty much aligns to what I certainly see when I'm talking to customers, you know, around the data protection capabilities we have. Sean, any view from the Veeam side?
No, yeah, I would absolutely agree with David. Most critical applications have their own application level type recovery mechanisms, right? Take SQL, for example. You have, you know, built-in tools to recover SQL. Some of the things we do around SQL is not about completely replacing that, but kind of streamlining it and enabling people who are not experts within those particular applications to be able to perform the recoveries faster, right? And the ones that rarely restore, right? We run into that quite often too, right? Normally when something does happen and they actually need to restore, right? That's normally a triggering event to look at a new data protection solution.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sean. Okay, so I'm just going to spend, literally sort of, the next sort of 5 minutes just talking about FlashBlade. I mean, Pure is very well known for Flash Array, which is, we talked about briefly, and Sean talked about the sort of integration points with Veeam. But FlashBlade was our second, if you like, our second product that, as I said earlier, has been around for about 24 months now. And obviously it's a, obviously the sort of giveaways in the title, it's a all flat, obviously another all flash offering, but it's very different from, from Flash Array. And it's really aiming to solve some different problems. And I think this slide really sums up quite nicely the perspective we've had, through our success with Flash Array, the perspective we've had into data centers. And obviously we all know we're stuck in that massive data growth cycle where data's, effectively out of control. So, we're seeing, you can see what we would call a bunch of data silos here. So, we've got, the traditional backup and recovery piece. We've seen the growth of data warehouses, but obviously what we've also seen, what we're also starting to see now are some of the newer, applications that are generating even more data. So I'm really talking about streaming analytics. Obviously we're seeing massive growth in AI as customers start to understand the value of, that their data that they hold about customers and research and so on gives them potentially a competitive edge. So we've just seen, like you all have seen, I'm sure, a massive growth in that data. But obviously what the sort of side effect of that is customers are effectively generally deploying point storage solutions to support those use cases. So typically you'll have, the backup appliance. That's been a very successful model in the data protection universe. Again, since the late sort of mid 2000s, it's been pretty successful. But you'll see storage stood up for warehouses and AI clusters and so forth. So we're seeing in our customer base, lots of different storage platforms really stood up, set up really for these large unstructured data applications, data-centric applications. And obviously what goes along with that, as I'm sure you'll all know, is that suddenly creates a lot of complexity because you've got many points to manage. And as the data volumes grow, those number of management points increase. So what goes along with that is your support costs increase, the complexity increases, the risk increases. So it's generally all fairly bad news as those data volumes grow, at that application layer. So that's sort of the presenting problem, and the problem we really built FlashBlade to solve, because FlashBlade was really a startup within a startup, because at that point Flash Array was starting to mature, and it didn't solve the unstructured data problem, which is really what you see here. Great for tier 1 Oracle and SAP and VMware, but didn't really solve the new breed of applications like Splunk and TensorFlow and Kafka and all these other new highly scalable but highly data rich applications. So this is really how FlashBlade was born. So very simply, and I'm very happy to talk offline in more detail around FlashBlade as a storage technology, but we built FlashBlade, and obviously, as the name suggests, it's all built on blade technology. So we ship 17 or 52 terabyte blades. You can have 15 blades in a single chassis. You can have 5 chassis as you scale out. So that gives you around 5 petabytes or so usable data. Obviously, again, much like Flash Array, the technology is changing all the time. We're hopeful, very hopeful, in the next sort of year or so, we'll be increasing blade sizes So we'll probably get over that 100 terabyte blade. And so you can see, based on blade technology, obviously scale out is fantastic. And I think the real the real advantage here is every time we add a blade into FlashBlade, that blade comes with its own storage, but also with its own networking and its own compute. And that's, I think, the real trick in scale out systems. Just traditionally scale out systems, as systems expand, and I'm certainly thinking, I'm certainly thinking of backup systems as they expand, because you generally have fixed compute. You can normally expand them on the storage side, but generally they've got fixed compute. So it really means the performance degrades as they get bigger. And with FlashBlade, that's not a problem we have, because each blade has its own storage, compute, and networking. So in fact, when we start looking at performance, we have a predictable linear scale out performance profile. So, once you fill a FlashBlade, once you get to 75 75 blades, which today is the maximum across those 5 chassis, you're looking at performance speeds, read speeds of around 280 terabytes. It presents NFS, it presents S3, and it presents SMB. And I guess that's the other difference here. And I think, again, my sense is FlashBlade is, the scale out object store, but it's subtly different from all the other object stores out there today, because it's not, I think there's definitely an association between, when you talk object store to customers, there's a tendency to think that object stores are cheap and deep and slow. And FlashBlade is sort of the almost the opposite of that. This is, in terms of performance, it's really changing the perception of object storage. So, and we see, in terms of the future, we all know the growth of Amazon and S3. S3 is, has pervaded backup applications for some time, but we're now seeing it start to pervade non-backup applications. So, for instance, Hadoop, I've got an S3 connector now, and a bunch of others are all building towards an S3 specification. So we think over time, we're very confident that the use case, the amount of applications that, if you like, talk object are going to increase exponentially, and customers will demand cheap and deep object stores, or traditional object stores will not be able to give the performance characteristics that customers demand. So we think we're in a pretty good position with with FlashBlade and the technology that it has. So let's and I guess to upscale a little bit, the value of FlashBlade, aside from its ability to scale out and its performance, is its ability to serve multiple use cases. So if you recall the slide I showed with those data silos everywhere, we at Pure talk about the FlashBlade being the data hub platform. And what we mean by that is its ability to run not only backup and recovery, which is obviously what we're talking about today, but if we look at the FlashBlade customer profile, 80% of our customers are using it for what we call rapid restore, so as a backup target, but they're also using it for some other operation, whether that's test dev, whether that's running some data analytics, whether it's running semiconductor design. So we've got a growing bunch of customers who are using FlashBlade as a backup target, but also to service some analytic capability or some other use case. So that you can see from that perspective, it starts to solve the problem around data silos. And we often talk at Pure about FlashBlade's ability to collapse, if you like, data silos. So let me, specifically sort of zero in now on the FlashBlade and Veeam integration. So this sort of simple architectural diagram really builds on what Sean guided you through earlier. So we've got our front end, which can be hopefully be flash array. We can use Veeam's very flexible and powerful universal storage API, and as you saw, there are lots of tools to help you, to help you get that, to help you get the value out of that. But obviously, those of us who've been in the backup world for a while, sort of live by the sort of principle that snapshots are no substitute for backup. So snapshots are fantastic for those very quick recovery, aggressive RPO and RTO. But you want to have, firstly, you want to have a destination to send them to, so you can keep them away from the source. So if the source blows up, you've got something to recover from. And also, not every storage array in the universe has the snapshotting features and the rich snapshots that flash array provides. So there's still a massive requirement for what you might call traditional streaming backups. And this is really kind of the message of this slide. And you can see all the numbers here. But when we're talking to customers about rapid restore, this is the sort of name we use to talk about, just using FlashBlade as a backup target, because we're all flash, we have this incredible read-write performance. We're often able to build a business case for FlashBlade just on the basis of, the lack of, if your application fails and you need to recover, then obviously every minute that application is unavailable, that's effectively costing the business money. And you can see some comparisons at the bottom there, but the thrust of this slide is really to say, yes, FlashBlade is, not a cheap and deep object store. It's a high performance scale out all flash object store. But what it does do is it provides you significant recovery improvements over traditional backup targets. And when you map that to a business case, you're effectively saving money because applications are recovered way more quickly. And you can see the example, you sort of got, and there's all sorts of, you can just do some simple searching, and there's all sorts of horror stories about, 30 hours it takes to recover a 6 terabyte database. I mean, that's effectively unusable. Yes, you're backing it up, but do you really want to be sitting around 30 hours for a recovery? So this is the sort of core, if you like, of our second F in flash to cloud, this ability to leverage FlashBlade's architecture and performance to be able to give you really rapid restore. And once you can deliver rapid restore, not only can it service, the traditional restore requirement, my application breaks and I need to recover and get my mission critical applications that my businesses run on back in production in time, it also now starts to enable, if you like, that backup reuse message. So I'm backing up all of this data day in and day out, and it's effectively largely become an insurance policy. And part of the problem is I can't recover it quickly enough, the 30-hour recovery for a 6 terabyte database. But now I can recover things quickly enough, I can start to make use of that backup data. And this just talks about, again, how easy the integration is between Veeam and FlashBlade. And this gives you some orders of magnitude when you use the deduplication technology that Veeam has already built in itself. And there's a couple of use cases there where you can see, we've got a conservative case where you see sort of 2 to 1, and then you've got a more aggressive, rate of deduplication. But I think, again, most of you all know that with deduplication, mileage tends to vary quite a lot on the kind of data that you're protecting. We all know that all data isn't equal, and some data deduplicates better than some other data sets. Sean, did you have some observations here?
Yeah, absolutely. So these are some of the numbers that we use, and very important, especially when you're trying to calculate how much storage space you're going to need for your backup data set. Right, 2 to 1 is a pretty conservative number that we use within Veeam. You're pretty much guaranteed to get at least a 2 to 1 data reduction. Real world data reduction can be anything from 3 to 1 up to 10 to 1, right? Just depending on the type of virtual machines you're backing up, right? If you're deploying them all off of templates, obviously you're going to get higher deduplication ratios, and it could vary, but we do have some tools that can help with sizing and just kind of trying to figure out what the change rate is per day, right? And so you can get a very good idea of what that data reduction is going to look like, and how much FlashBlade capacity you're going to need for your particular environment.
Excellent, thank you, Sean. So I'm just cognizant of time. Again, Sean shared a success story around flash array integration. We've got 2 or 3 success stories here around some of the success we've had with FlashBlade as a backup target with Veeam, and you can see, I think what's interesting about the first one here, the Cancer Treatment Center. I think the business value is the really interesting one, and we often get into this discussion, and I sort of alluded to it already, that we've got cheap and deep object store and FlashBlade, which is a high performance scale out, all flash, and obviously there's you kind of start to think about the cost dimensions, and often we get asked the question, well, why would I want to use flash for secondary storage? I just need cheap storage. But there's a reality, right, where yes, it's cheaper on a quote, but when you look at the whole end to end, so some of it is addressing those SLA requirements. I think then what we start to see is the business case for using flash as a backup tier is starts to make sense. And obviously we also have the advantage of being a modern, a very modern platform. So floor space is somewhat is obviously much less than comparative solutions. Power consumption is significantly less, and so forth. So it's not a I think my guidance here is to, again, like everything else, think of the whole solution from end to end, and think about power and cooling and data center floor space, and also think about those business critical applications and what it costs your business when they're not around. And this one, again, I mean, all 3 of these stories, this is a healthcare provider, and again, we've got mentioned that this particular customer really liked the evergreen model in much the same way that I described evergreen for flash array. We also, we have the identical program for FlashBlade, and you can see on the screen here, this customer was actually, doing 3 things with their FlashBlade. So they were using a portion of it to back up using Veeam, but they were hosting some Oracle testing on there, and they were using some test dev applications. And again, by bringing FlashBlade across all of these use cases, again, the TCO starts to look very aggressive compared to alternative solutions. And this one again, this success was really around the whole idea of future proofing. So I'm buying into something that I know I can keep pace with the changes in the IT universe from both a form factor and performance perspective. And again, you've got the data hub use case, and the ability to change technology with those no forklift upgrades was certainly very appealing to this customer. So I just want to get to just for the final 10 minutes or so, I just want to talk about now kind of the next stage. So we've had a lot of success already with just using FlashBlade and Veeam. We've got over 200 customers using FlashBlade with Veeam. So we've had a lot of success together, and this is sort of the latest and greatest, the sort of next iteration of our message. So we're great. We've got Flash primary, we've got Flash secondary. Now, what's the next iteration in this model? So, I talked about, in fact, let's do a poll. So we just wanted to get some quick, impressions for those of you who are, I know there's still a lot of tape out there. We just wanted to get a sense of where your thinking is around tape, whether you're happy, whether you're considering, in the next 12 months, leveraging public cloud, private cloud, which could be on-prem object stores, or you're going to keep using tape, or you've already made the transition.
Yeah, so I popped up the poll question on the screen. Like David says, it says in the next 12 months, are you considering public cloud or private object storage for long-term data retention? Example, replacing tape. So I'll give everyone a few moments to answer this question. The answers are public cloud, private cloud, or considering one of those two, or maybe you're just happy with tape. I'm curious to see what the results are on this.
Yes, I think this is going to be really interesting.
All right, looks like most everyone has responded. Thank you, everyone. Let me go ahead and share the results. All right, and it looks like, is that 34% roughly are already using cloud, either public or private. And then 52% are considering either public or private. And then 14% say they're happy with tape. David, what do you think?
I mean, this is not talking cliches, but this is pretty much, based on my experience, this is pretty much how the world's dividing up. So there's certainly a band of customers who are, have got considerable investment in tape, maybe in a regulated industry, or maybe in may have regulations around, where data needs to live and can't leave sort of national borders. And then, if we take out the tape numbers there, that's pretty much how the world divides up. It's, public cloud, I'm not surprised it's a little bit more in use than perhaps private cloud. But I think what's really interesting is, the comment I made earlier, which is, I think there's always been an assumption that public cloud was the go-to place. But actually, I think there's this whole concept of, I think analysts call it the repatriation of data from public cloud. So that actually, not cliche, but really jives with, what customers have been saying to me over the last 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, I think it's really encouraging to see that, roughly 86%, if I'm doing my math right, say they're already using or are considering using cloud of some kind.
Absolutely. Great. So in the interest of time, let's sort of plow on. So, okay, so very, very quickly then, to talk about this ability to be able to move to cloud. Pure's third product, if you like, was actually an acquisition. So we made an acquisition over a year ago of a product called StorageUse, which we then renamed OBJECTEngine. And really, there's lots of, this slide's a little bit busy, but OBJECTEngine really is a scale-out S3 deduplication engine. So we can take a feed from any product. So today we're generally, working with our partners at Veeam and others, but we can take a S3, an unencrypted, uncompressed, and undeduped S3 data stream, and we can deduplicate that and then write that to any S3 target. So that S3 target today can be obviously AWS, and then there will be a range of S3 object stores that we're testing that you can also write to. So OBJECTEngine really gives you that capability to move data from on-prem, whether it's going to a private object store or the cloud. The difference, and you're probably also thinking, well, that's kind of old hat. Well, I think OBJECTEngine is subtly different. First, it's S3, right? So it relies on the S3 industry standard protocol, which is great news, I think, for us, and hence the investment we made, just because, the world, as I said earlier, the world appears to be turning S3. So yes, today we're targeting backup applications, but as I said, Hadoop and others are starting to write S3, S3 capabilities. So you can put OBJECTEngine in front of anything that can write S3, whether that's a backup app like Veeam or whether it's something else. And we will see a massive ramp up of that over the next, 2 or 3 years. And I think the other piece that's actually quite important is it was written, if you look at its heritage, it was really written for AWS. That's how storage use started life. And obviously when you write something that runs in the cloud, it has to have the dimensions and properties of cloud applications. And certainly for ObjectEngine, I think it's, apart from its sort of performance and efficiency you can see on this slide, is its capability to scale. And it's very, very similar conceptually to the scaling capability I talked about with FlashBlade. So in the ObjectEngine world today, as we add additional nodes, and our nodes today come in the form of an appliance, there's 2 ObjectEngine nodes per appliance, and you need a minimum of 2 appliances and 4 ObjectEngine nodes to function. We can scale horizontally. So if you wanted more restore performance, we can add more nodes, and as that front end increases, so when you reach 15 petabytes, we'd ask you to add 2 more nodes, but it doesn't stop you from adding nodes in between. So from a scale perspective, it's incredibly powerful and very easy to scale out. And then just in the interest of time, so to bring it back very quickly to the Veeam use case, so we already have this in production. We've actually already got customers using this, and we only actually released ObjectEngine officially in April. So we've made some very rapid progress with the help of the Veeam team. And this is really how it interacts with Veeam. So we've already talked about the integration with FlashArray. ObjectEngine really provides what Veeam defines as the capacity tier, and FlashBlade provides what we call the performance tier. And this diagram very simply shows you that we write, the initial backup goes to FlashBlade, and then you can tier off, if you like, those backups to ObjectEngine and then ultimately to the cloud. So using all under the control and orchestration of Veeam, all Pure is providing here is the storage infrastructure. And the other thing to understand here is ObjectEngine doesn't hold any data. Okay, all the data passes through ObjectEngine and gets deduped on its way to the S3 target. So it's a stateless, highly scalable deduplication engine and integrates very nicely. We had to do very little work, almost no engineering work. In fact, there was 0 engineering work to get this to work with our colleagues at Veeam. And this is the success story that we've got right now. As I say, we were delighted with this one. We were early out of the gate. We only released at the end of March, early April. We've got 1 customer in production here with ObjectEngine, FlashBlade, and Veeam. And again, what really won us the business here was the performance piece, not only from FlashBlade, but also coming directly from ObjectEngine, the ability to recover, very quickly. We typically see sustained recovery performance via ObjectEngine of 15 terabytes an hour or plus. Okay, so sorry we had to kind of rush the last few pieces there, but I think, David, we conclude the formal part now, and we can open up quickly. I know we've only got a couple of minutes left, if anything, but happy to take some questions for anyone who's got any.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a few good questions I want to see if we can quickly answer before we wrap up. George is asking, or clarifying, I guess, does the backup SAN use spinning disk or flash?
So I can take that question. So
sure.
when you're backing up with Veeam, we can land on any disk-based repository, right? Whether that's block, direct attach, or even a file share of sorts, right? And backing that repository can be flashed or spinning disks.
Okay.
There are of course distinct advantages, especially from a restoration performance, and if you're leveraging data labs, depending on what type of disk or flash repository that you're using.
Okay. And Tyler's asking, where do you enable compression and deduplication, in this scenario we're talking about here? Do you do it in the SAN? Do you do it in Veeam? Do you do it on both?
So without getting into a lot of complexity, our deduplication and compression is actually complementary to what Veeam provides. So in the use case we talked about today with Object Engine, we can actually provide, you can actually continue to use Veeam's deduplication, and you can augment that with Object Engine. So you can actually, we showed the slide earlier about the rates you can get with Veeam, and Object Engine actually gives you a layer above that.
Nice. Tyler is also asking, is Azure flash to cloud on the roadmap?
Yes, so yeah, we fully expect to have Azure available as a target for Object Engine by the end of this calendar year, and we'll also have it that when we release the Azure integration, we'll also be running a version of Object Engine that can actually live inside of AWS. So it will run natively in AWS. So if you're just running applications inside of AWS, then we can deduplicate those with the Object Engine as well. And by the end of this calendar year, we'll have both capabilities.
Nice, nice. Okay. Any MTBF stats on FlashBlade?
This comes up every now and again. I think our stated MTBF is something like, it's in the realm of around 10 years.
Okay, that's a long time. Very nice.
Well, that's what our engineering designers tell me when I ask.
That's impressive. Tom is asking, what's the minimum capacity of FlashBlade, like to just get started?
So the very smallest capacity of FlashBlade is 17 terabyte blades. So that is the smallest. That's a single chassis with some redundancy. That's the smallest FlashBlade you can get started with.
Okay. And then do you need any resources in AWS besides a storage repository for the capacity tier to the cloud? Does that make sense?
I mean, there's nothing, Sean, from an Object Engine perspective. No, I mean, all we need in AWS is just the S3 bucket that we write to, and when we write to that S3 bucket, the capacity tier effectively points at Object Engine, and Object Engine sort of logically reference the bucket in AWS. No, we don't. Apart from the capacity, we don't need anything, and we do store the metadata and the actual deduplicated backup data in that S3 bucket in AWS. So if you have a fault with Object Engine, you can effectively, because it's stateless, you can effectively just put a new Object Engine and point it towards the bucket, synchronize with Veeam, and you're already up and running again. So there's no data structures on Object Engine to protect. But to the question, no, we don't need anything other than capacity in an S3 bucket and credentials in AWS.
Okay, awesome. Awesome. Well, this has been a great event. I think that's all the time we have for live Q&A. But David, Sean, thank you so much for being on today.
My pleasure. Thanks for attending, everybody.
Yep. Thank you, everyone.
Before we go, I want to announce the winner of today's $300 Amazon gift card. That's going to Brian Howard of Mississippi. Congratulations, Brian Howard of Mississippi. And I also want to remind everyone to check out the handouts that are available for download right there in your GoToWebinar console on modernizing data protection with Flash and Cloud. So you can download those PDFs and check them out after the event. And of course, always visit PureStorage.com and Veeam.com for more information on this really incredible latest and greatest data protection solution, flash to cloud. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and have a great day.